Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to get into something I know you've all thought about before, which is what makes people and companies act in those socially responsible ways? Is it pure altruism? Is it PR? Is there something else going on entirely?
Yeah, it's super interesting, right? So we have this whole stack of sources for you this time. Um, Academic papers, even one from Princeton, and a blog post on volunteering, and explorations of global citizenship, even corporate advice. And basically, we're going to try and untangle all these motivations behind socially responsible behavior. And I think, trust me, you'll find some of these really surprising.
So let's just dive right in, I guess.
Yeah.
We see a lot of this, right? Like people donating to charities, people volunteering, people just generally trying to live ethically. It's pretty heartwarming. But is it, really purely because of altruism, or is there something more complicated going on, do you think?
Well, I mean, pure altruism, I think, is definitely a thing, but it's not the whole picture. I mean, think about it. Anonymous donations, those are considered the most selfless, right?
Yeah.
But they only make up 1% of all giving. Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, because I think, we like recognition as humans.
That's true. Yeah. It makes you think okay, if nobody was watching, would we still do the good deed?
Right. And this is, I think, where this concept of honor seeking comes in.
Yeah.
And I think this paper, Individual and Corporate Social Responsibility, really highlighted this. We're very attracted to public praise, getting a medal for blood donation and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's almost like we're hardwired for this positive reinforcement.
I mean, and on the flip side of that, you have that stigma avoidance thing going
Yeah.
on. You think about those walls of shame online for bad behavior. Nobody wants to be the person that's up there.
Right.
So there's a certain degree to which maybe we act responsibly because we don't want to be judged for not acting responsibly.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's very powerful, even if it's not conscious all the time.
Yeah.
Motivator, right?
Right.
But this thing about social approval, I think it can also lead to some unintended consequences.
How so?
Well, for example, you have this overjustification effect,
Okay.
which is basically the more we advertise doing good things, the less genuine those actions actually end up feeling even to ourselves. So
Oh, that's interesting.
it's we're kind of diluting the good intentions
Oh, I see.
with seeking validation from other people.
So bragging about volunteering would make you feel less altruistic about it.
Almost, right? It's kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And then there's this other issue of what they call signal distortion.
Okay.
And basically, we tend to, I think, favor these visible good deeds over ones that aren't as flashy.
Right.
So giving a huge donation to a prestigious university might give you more social capital than just quietly supporting your local school.
Right.
Even if that local impact would be bigger.
Right. So it's not even about doing good. It's about being seen doing good.
Yeah, that's right.
It makes you wonder, are people just trying to buy prestige?
Yeah, and I think it leads us to another interesting thing, which is this zero-sum game element of social image.
Oh.
So what if everybody just suddenly became super socially responsible?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that actually decrease the value of those actions?
I guess so, yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like fashion. Once it's mainstream, it's no longer special.
Right, exactly. I love that analogy. So it's almost like there's this competition then to be the most good, which kind of is ironic, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's not what we're supposed to be doing, I guess, according to this whole idea of selflessness. But okay, what about corporations?
Yeah.
How does this desire for social approval and this goodness stuff, how does this play out with corporate social responsibility?
Right. Well, I think we can start by looking at Benabou and Tirol's paper. It's also called Individual and Corporate Social Responsibility.
Right.
And they basically lay out three main visions for CSR. And the first one is kind of this win-win scenario.
Okay.
Where companies basically see doing good as just being good for their business in the long run. So,
yeah.
It's investing in things like employee well-being or sustainable practices, stuff like that.
Right, because that's going to make your employees happier, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's enlightened self-interest.
Right. Yeah. I mean, happy workforce is a good thing.
Yeah.
And obviously, a good brand image is also valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, are all companies really doing this?
All right. I mean, it sounds nice, but
Right.
are they really playing the long game like that?
Yeah, I think the second vision is what they call delegated philanthropy.
Okay.
And it's basically where companies, they act as a way for us to express our values.
Okay. Mm.
So it's like, think about like fair trade coffee,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
It's a lot easier for us to just buy it from a company we like
Right.
than to like track down individual farmers to support. Right.
Yeah, so they become kind of the vehicle. It's like we're outsourcing our ethics to a company, I guess is what you're saying.
Exactly. And they're just responding to, consumer demand, right?
Right.
So it's our desire to do good, but they're the ones doing it.
Okay, that makes sense. What about that third vision, the one that you were saying is a little bit more like controversial?
Right. So the third vision it's called insider-initiated philanthropy. And this one is basically saying that, sometimes CSR is not actually so much about responding to, stakeholders. It's more about executives and their own personal agendas.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's kind of like their pet projects and,
Mm.
their favorite causes are the ones that get company money, even if it doesn't really benefit the company at all or align with like the values of the employees or anything like
So
that.
it's like the CEO could just be really into like, I don't know, animal welfare and just decide that the company is going to give a bunch of money to, saving the whales or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Even if that has nothing to do with what the company actually does.
Right. Wow, that's really interesting. So that brings up like a bunch of questions about corporate governance, right? Like whose money is it really?
Right, exactly.
And who are they using it to support? It's a complicated situation, isn't it?
Yeah. And, I think sometimes these different visions, they can be really hard to like separate in the real world.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And a good example, I think, is, think about Enron, right?
Oh, yeah.
They were like famous for giving a lot to charity, but then, the whole scandal happened.
Right. So were those donations real or was it just an image thing?
Exactly. Was that true social responsibility or just them trying to cover up for, bad behavior?
Right. Yeah. How can you even tell? It makes you wonder how many other companies are doing that kind of thing.
Right. So it brings up a really important question. How can we, as like individuals, even know which companies are truly like walking the walk, I guess you could say?
That's a great question. We need to figure out how to like separate the genuine stuff from all the noise.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's like this constant information overload.
It is.
When it comes to this whole CSR thing, like how do we even, how do we know who to trust? How do we figure out like what all these claims really mean?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges
Yeah.
with this whole thing about like socially responsible behavior is it's really hard to know
Yeah.
who is genuinely being ethical and who's just doing, what was it called? Greenwashing,
Yeah, greenwashing,
Just
right?
making it look good.
Yeah, and it's frustrating.
It is.
You see all these labels, all these certifications, and it's like, what do they even mean? Who's like checking on these companies?
Exactly.
It makes you just want to give up.
Yeah, it's easy to feel like, well, why even bother?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if I can't even figure it out, what's the point?
Right. And then, on the other hand, there's this pressure to do everything perfectly,
Yeah.
buy only ethical products, support all the causes,
Perfect. Yeah, it's exhausting.
It is exhausting. And that's where I think this idea of, free riding comes in, which
Yeah.
this paper, Individual and Corporate Social Responsibility, they really get into it.
Yeah.
It's like we all want the better world, but like, how much are we each personally willing to give up?
Right. It's like we want the benefits without having to do the work.
That's right.
I always think about that saying, like, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
Exactly.
It's kind of like that.
Right. I mean, it's easy to support a cause when it doesn't cost us anything. But are we really willing to change our lives, even if it's, inconvenient or uncomfortable?
Yeah. It's a tough question.
It is.
I think part of it is just these problems like, global poverty, climate change. They just seem so big.
They are big.
So huge. Like, what can I even do?
Yeah, no, I get it. It can feel overwhelming. But think about that blog post we had. 10 creative ways to volunteer.
Oh, yeah.
One of the main points they made was like, just focus on what you really care about.
Yeah.
Don't try to do everything at once. It's the same with this whole SRB thing.
Right.
You don't have to be perfect. You just have to start somewhere.
So it's like, okay, instead of getting overwhelmed by like the whole, enormity of all of it,
Yeah,
I can just pick something specific and focus my energy there.
exactly. Whether it's like, your carbon footprint or supporting businesses you think are ethical or advocating for, whatever kind of social justice issue you care about,
Right.
even small actions, they add up.
Yeah, I like that. It's not about perfection. It's about just doing something.
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense for like, our individual actions. But what about this whole idea of like global citizenship? What does that even mean, like in today's world?
Right. Well, I
What
think
does it mean to be a responsible global citizen?
yeah, well, I think this document, Global Citizenship Education, Topics and Learning Objectives, they had some good points on this. Like, it's about, like, realizing that, we're all connected, and our choices, they have ripple effects that go way beyond just, like, our own little communities.
So it's not enough to just be aware of these issues, right?
Right.
It's like I have to understand how I'm part of the problem too.
Exactly. Like, the stuff we buy, it affects workers in other countries.
Right.
And climate change is hitting some communities way harder than others.
Yeah.
And the privileges we have, they might actually be built on, systems that are unfair to other people.
Yeah. It's a lot to think about.
It is, but it also means that, we have the power to change things.
Oh, that's true. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah, if our choices have such big consequences, then we can use them to do good too.
Yeah. So things like, I don't know, choosing fair trade products, reducing how much stuff we buy, like advocating for policies that actually promote like social and environmental justice. That's all part of it.
Exactly. All those little things, they add up to something bigger.
Okay, but I still keep coming back to this like information overload thing.
Yeah.
Like, even if I'm motivated, even if I want to do the right thing, how do I like develop the skills to sort through all this information?
Well, I think, remember, global citizenship education, it's not just about knowing facts. It's about learning how to, like, evaluate your sources,
Right.
analyze different perspectives, and come to your own conclusions.
So basically, like, don't just believe everything you read.
Right.
You have to like question it and think for yourself.
Exactly. There's rarely one right answer to these big global problems.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that every source has its own biases, right?
It's true.
So you can't just take everything at face value.
So we have to be like critical consumers of information, not just passive, I guess, absorbers of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even more importantly, you have to be aware of your own biases
Oh, yeah. That's
because they can really affect how you see things.
yeah.
So it's a constant process of learning and growing.
It's like always expanding your perspective.
Yeah, and being open-minded and critical and, being willing to question even your own beliefs.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is, but that's what it means to be a global citizen,
It's a journey.
It is, yeah.
And, speaking of education and all of this stuff, you mentioned this article.
Yeah.
I think it was called How Universities Can Encourage Social Responsibility in Their Students.
Yes.
It seems like the younger generation, they're already kind of leading the way here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Gen Z, I guess.
Yeah, they're growing up with, like, climate change is just a reality for them. And social justice, these are things they really care about.
Yeah, they're not messing around.
No, and they expect institutions like universities and stuff to reflect those values.
So are universities doing that?
I think they're starting to.
Okay.
They're adding sustainability to their courses and offering more chances to get involved in the community.
Oh, that's good.
And they're working with organizations that are doing, the real work on the ground.
Yeah. So it's like finally we're connecting education and personal values and action.
Exactly. It's a really powerful combination.
It is. It's encouraging. It feels like there's this shift happening,
I think so.
like a real change in how we think about these things.
Yeah. Where it's a more, like, connected and compassionate world, I think.
Yeah, I like that. And I think you said something earlier that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, this isn't just about saving the world. It's about changing ourselves, too.
Absolutely.
Like, even just trying to be a better person, grappling with all these tough questions, it makes you grow. It makes you learn, and
Yeah.
I think it makes you more compassionate and more, like, engaged.
Yeah, you're right. And as we grow and change, so does our understanding of what it means to be a responsible citizen.
It's like a never-ending process.
It is. There's always more to learn.
It's kind of crazy to think, this whole deep dive into socially responsible behavior, it's not even just about the actions, right?
Yeah.
It's all these motivations behind it, this desire for recognition, like we were saying, and even like where those good intentions, maybe they don't actually lead to any real impact. It's complicated.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were talking earlier about, like, this honor-seeking thing.
Right.
And how we all want those pats on the back.
Right.
It can be a good thing, but it can also be, a
Yeah.
little bit of a trap when it comes to SRB.
Totally. It makes you think, like, am I really doing this because I want to help or just because it makes me look good?
Yeah, and that's a question we all have to ask ourselves, I think.
For sure.
And it reminded me of that last point in Benabou and Tirol's paper,
Oh, yeah.
that provocative thought they left us with. Like, if we're so driven by this desire for recognition,
Yeah.
are we actually becoming, like, more self-centered when we're trying to do good?
Whoa, that is a mind bender, right?
It is.
Like, are we actually solving problems or just making ourselves feel better about it? And like, can you even have both? Can you have that social approval thing and also be genuinely altruistic?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't think there's an easy answer,
Yeah.
but I do think that being aware of it, our own motivations, like you said, that's a really important first step.
Right.
So we can at least try to be a little more honest with
Or
ourselves.
humble. Yeah.
Yeah, and realize that, none of us are perfect.
Yeah, we're all just trying to figure it out.
Exactly. And we're
Well,
all in this together.
speaking of which, like, this whole idea of global citizenship that keeps coming up,
Yeah.
it feels like it's woven through this entire conversation we've been having.
It really has. And I think it's a really powerful way to think about, how connected we all are
Yeah.
and how our choices really do affect other people, even far away.
Right, like, we can't pretend we're separate anymore.
No, not at all. We're all part of this big web, like you were saying.
And that's kind of scary.
It is.
But also, I guess it's empowering because it means we can actually make a difference.
Exactly. Like even small things, if everybody does them, it can have a huge impact.
Right, yeah.
And, I think global citizenship, it's not even just about those big, like, world-changing actions.
Oh, okay.
It's about how we live every day, how we treat each other,
Right.
how we treat the environment.
So it's like being mindful of what we buy, trying to reduce our waste, speaking up when we see injustice, just being kind to people.
Exactly. All of those everyday things. That's where it starts.
Wow, this has been a really, like, eye-opening deep dive, I gotta say.
It has been interesting, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's given me a lot to think about, like what it really means to be socially responsible, both personally and, as part of this bigger global community.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
To get you thinking, to challenge your assumptions, and, to give you the tools to keep learning about this stuff.
Yeah, I feel inspired, I feel motivated, I feel like I can actually do something.
That's great to hear.
Well, I think that's about all the time we have for this deep dive
Oh.
into socially responsible behavior, at least for today.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
I hope it's been helpful, and, I hope you'll keep thinking about all this stuff.
Absolutely. It's a journey, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, it's not a destination, it's a process.
Yeah, so keep learning, keep questioning, and keep trying to make a difference, whatever that means for you.
That's great advice. Until next time, everybody, stay curious.
And stay engaged.
We'll see you later.